Look at this. You know what's really interesting about this situation? A lot of fans are focused on what the team has already done, but I think the bigger story is what they haven't done yet. Sitting on that much available cap space this late in the off-season tells me they're keeping the door open for something bigger. Personally, I don't think this is about making a flashy move right now. I think it's about being ready when the right opportunity shows up. Whether that's a veteran free agent, a surprise trade target, or a move nobody sees coming, this front office has put itself in a position to be aggressive if the team starts winning early. And honestly, that's what should have fans paying attention. Because the most important addition to this roster might not happen until the season is already underway. Let's talk about what's going on here. But first, click the like button and write in the comments. Go Vikings! The Minnesota Vikings suddenly find themselves in a fascinating position. And what makes this story so intriguing is that the team may have more flexibility than many fans realized just a few weeks ago. After recent contract developments involving Jonathan Allen and Harrison Smith, Minnesota is now sitting on approximately $13.4 million in available cap space for the 2026 season, creating a situation that could significantly impact the roster moving forward. That number immediately raises an important question. What exactly are the Vikings planning to do with that money? The timing is interesting because Minnesota already possesses one of the more complete rosters in the NFC. This is not a team desperately searching for starters across the board. Instead, the Vikings appear to be in a position where every move can be targeted, strategic, and designed to push a good roster closer to championship contention. One of the biggest areas being discussed is the possibility of adding another veteran pass rusher. At first glance, that may sound unnecessary considering the talent already on the defensive front, but circumstances can change quickly during a long NFL season. Veteran edge rushers remain available, and several notable names could theoretically fit into Brian Flores' defensive system. Among those names is Cameron Jordan, one of the most respected defensive players of his generation. What makes Jordan particularly intriguing from a Vikings perspective is not only his production, but also his family connection to Minnesota. His father, Steve Jordan, is already immortalized in Vikings history as a member of the franchise's Ring of Honor. The possibility of Cameron wearing the same colors his father once represented would certainly create a compelling storyline. What is perhaps even more surprising is that Jordan continues to produce at a high level. After many believed his best football was behind him, he responded with a season that included 10.5 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, and 15 quarterback hits, while continuing to provide reliable run defense. Those numbers suggest a player who can still contribute on all three downs rather than functioning strictly as a situational pass rusher. Another veteran-generating discussion is Von Miller. While his name may not have dominated headlines recently, his production remains noteworthy. Miller recorded 9 sacks, 15 quarterback hits, and 6 tackles for loss during the season. More importantly, he brings something that statistics alone cannot measure: championship experience. For a Vikings team attempting to take the next step, Miller's value could extend well beyond Sundays. His experience in high-pressure playoff environments, his understanding of preparation, and his ability to mentor younger players could prove invaluable. This becomes especially relevant when discussing Dallas Turner, whose athletic profile has often drawn comparisons to Miller. Having a future Hall of Famer in the same meeting room could accelerate the development of one of Minnesota's most important young defenders. Leadership is another factor that cannot be ignored. If Harrison Smith is no longer part of the long-term picture, the defense could be searching for another respected veteran voice. Miller has spent years leading NFL locker rooms and helping younger teammates navigate the demands of professional football. That type of influence often becomes evident only behind the scenes, but it can have a major impact on a team's culture. Clowney also remains a notable option. Although his overall game may not be as complete as it once was, he continues to provide value as a pass rusher. Clowney finished the season with 8.5 sacks, despite playing on a struggling defense. Supporters of this idea believe that playing under Brian Flores and alongside a stronger defensive supporting cast could potentially allow him to become even more productive. What is becoming increasingly clear is that Minnesota's front office is not operating from a position of desperation. The Vikings can afford to be selective. They can evaluate whether a veteran addition is truly necessary or whether preserving that cap flexibility for a future opportunity makes more sense. And that is where this story becomes even more interesting. Several observers believe the Vikings may not use this money immediately at all. Instead, the organization could be positioning itself for something much bigger later in the season. If Minnesota gets off to a strong start and emerges as a legitimate contender in the NFC, that available cap space could become a powerful weapon at the trade deadline. In other words, the most important move connected to this 13 drills. $4 million may not happen in June, July, or even August. It could happen months from now when playoff races begin to take shape and teams start making difficult decisions about their veterans and long-term futures. That's what makes the current situation so compelling for Vikings fans. The roster already appears competitive. The coaching staff has established a clear identity, and now the franchise has financial flexibility that could be deployed at exactly the right moment. Do you think the Vikings should spend this cap space now on a veteran like Cameron Jordan, Von Miller, or Jadeveon Clowney? Or would you rather see Minnesota save the money for a major trade during the season? Share your thoughts in the comments. But if Minnesota decides not to pursue any of those veteran free agents, the most revealing part of this entire discussion may be what it says about the Vikings' long-term strategy. Because according to the analysis surrounding the team's cap situation, the expectation isn't necessarily that Minnesota will rush out and sign one of these available veterans. The more likely scenario may be that the organization is intentionally keeping its options open for something that could become available later in the season. And when you start looking at the roster through that lens, a very interesting picture begins to emerge. The Vikings are entering 2026 with expectations. This isn't a rebuilding team. This isn't a roster hoping to sneak into the playoffs. Minnesota believes it can compete. The question is whether the team can elevate itself from playoff contender to legitimate Super Bowl threat. That's where preserving cap flexibility becomes incredibly valuable. Imagine a scenario where the Vikings start the season 5-2 or 6-1. Imagine Brian Flores' defense is playing at an elite level. Imagine the offense is performing efficiently, and Minnesota is right in the middle of the NFC Championship conversation. In that situation, would the Vikings really want to spend every available dollar on a veteran signing during the offseason? Or would they rather have the ability to strike when another franchise decides to sell assets at the trade deadline? That's where a name like Denzel Ward enters the conversation. Ward represents the type of player who could instantly change the ceiling of a defense. The discussion centers around the possibility that if Cleveland struggles and finds itself out of contention, veteran players could become available. Ward is viewed as one example of the type of impact player Minnesota could target if the opportunity presented itself. When you look at the current Vikings secondary, there's already talent in place. Byron Murphy remains a key piece. Isaiah Rodgers provides depth and versatility. The defensive backfield is far from a weakness, but adding a player of Ward's caliber would transform the conversation entirely. Suddenly, opposing quarterbacks would be forced to deal with one of the strongest secondaries in football. Suddenly, Brian Flores would gain even more flexibility to disguise coverages and pressure packages. Suddenly, the Vikings could potentially match up much better against the elite passing attacks they'll encounter in the NFC playoffs. That's the type of move that can separate a good team from a championship-caliber team. What makes the possibility even more interesting is the financial aspect. Ward's contract situation could provide Minnesota with flexibility. If a trade occurred and things didn't work out as expected, there would still be options available after the season. That lowers some of the risk that normally comes with acquiring a high-profile veteran. Of course, cornerback is only one possibility. The Vikings could decide another pass rusher is needed. They could determine safety becomes a priority. They could even identify another defensive position as the missing piece once the season unfolds and weaknesses become more apparent. That's the beauty of maintaining cap space. You don't have to make the decision today. You can gather information. You can evaluate your roster in real games. You can see how young players develop. Then you can attack the trade market with precision instead of guessing during the off-season. And if there's one thing we've learned about successful NFL organizations, it's that patience often creates opportunities. The Vikings know they have talent. They know they have one of the most creative defensive coordinators in football. They know they possess veteran leadership and a roster capable of winning games. What they don't know yet is exactly what challenge will emerge during the season. Maybe an injury exposes a weakness. Maybe a position group underperforms expectations. Maybe a surprising contender puts pressure on Minnesota to become more aggressive. By holding on to that cap space, the Vikings give themselves the flexibility to respond to whatever challenge arises. There's also another reason this approach makes sense. The NFC remains incredibly competitive. Teams like the Philadelphia Eagles continue to set the standard. Other contenders will be loading up throughout the year. Standing still is rarely enough if the ultimate goal is winning a championship. That's why many around the league expect Minnesota to be buyers rather than sellers if they reach the trade deadline with a winning record. The roster is simply too talented to waste an opportunity. If the Vikings are positioned for a playoff run, adding a difference-maker could become an obvious move. And perhaps that's the biggest takeaway from this entire story. The $13.4 million isn't just money. It's optionality. It's flexibility. It's leverage. It's the ability to react faster than competitors when a major opportunity presents itself. Whether that ultimately means signing a veteran like Cameron Jordan, bringing in a respected leader such as Von Miller, adding depth through another free agent, or making a blockbuster trade during the season remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The Vikings have positioned themselves to act. And in today's NFL, having the ability to act at exactly the right moment can sometimes be just as valuable as having the money itself. Now I want to hear from all of you, Vikings fans. Should Minnesota use that cap space right now on a veteran free agent, or save every dollar for a potential trade deadline splash? Do you see the Vikings as buyers or sellers in 2026? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Smash that like button if you enjoyed the discussion. Subscribe for more Vikings coverage. And, as always, let's hear what the SKOL Nation thinks about the future of this roster. Go Vikings!